Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gordon Jones. I am a fiction created by Alex Jahans. I am the anti-critic. I have a gun that does I know not what. Welcome to my show. You're about to watch a video. Suppose you'll like it, or maybe not, I don't know. Whatever, on with the show! Space parasites created God through telekinesis. Welcome, young weird people, to my school where we teach weird people how to fight the evil weird people. I'm not afraid of death, and that's why I can kick your ass. I am Awesome Man. He is such a shithead, and he's going to hell, but he's on our side. It's time. Let's talk about Romans, or specifically the History of Rome podcast by Mike Duncan. Okay, so, I know, I'm reviewing a podcast. Who reviews podcasts? I mean, why review a podcast? You don't have to pay for it, it's available online, it's free, it's audio only, so what the hell am I going to use for clips? Oh yeah, that's right, I don't use clips, not yet anyway, because I'm working on something. But no, it's Mike Duncan's History of Rome podcast. Where shall I begin? With the beginning, how I got introduced to it. See, I like analysis of sci-fi and fantasy. I love stuff that is awesome, okay? I love people when they nerd out and just go, oh my god, have you heard about this? This is so awesome! Let me do all about it! And so I looked up podcasts about the Discord, because I listened to podcasts about Doctor Who, and I was just like, oh, I want to find podcasts about the Discord, and now I actually know someone who runs a podcast about the Discord. But anyway, I found the episode from the Dissecting Worlds on The Watch, and it's brilliant. Dissecting Worlds is brilliant. It's on the Geek Syndicate network, which means that basically you have to get it as part of the Geek Syndicate podcast because it's in that podcast series. But anyway, the point is that Dissecting Worlds is awesome, and they are like historians, or they're keenly interested in like history and Rome and stuff. So They keep mentioning Rome throughout it all. Sort of like, yes, and that concludes our podcast on Klingons in Star Trek. Wasn't that an awful lot like Rome? Yes, it was. It was an awful lot like Rome, don't you think? Yes, very much like Rome. Yes, and thank you. That was our podcast on Mass Effect. That's quite a lot like Rome. Yes, I do think it's quite a lot like Rome. Yes, that was our podcast on Judge Dredd. It's quite a lot like Rome. Yes, I do think it was quite a lot like Rome. Yes, thank you. That was our podcast on South. Quite a lot like Rome. Yes, I do think it was quite a lot like Rome. And so they kept mentioning it until finally, huzzah of huzzahs, the King of Kings, they did a podcast on the alternate history of Rome. And yes, this made me tired. So yes, it's quite a lot like this, quite a lot like that. Yes, it's funny that that's still quite a lot like this and quite a lot like that. Yes. And they went into great depth and detail, and they mentioned the History of Rome podcast by Mike Duncan. They in fact wanted to get him on the podcast. And at that point, I was just like, yay, podcast, it's awesome. But as I've been listening back to the Dissecting Worlds podcast, because as I said, I love it when I listen to people go, oh my god, this is awesome. I discovered, I rediscovered these hints about the History of Rome podcast by Mike Duncan, and I'd caught up with Dissecting Worlds, hence I was listening to the repeats, and I got into a dry period where there weren't really many podcasts out updating. And, it's like Radio Friscaro's not updating, Staggering Stories isn't updating because everybody's ill, the Doctor Who Book Club podcast isn't updating, the Doctor Who Writers Room isn't updating, and all these podcasts that I follow, that I love, they weren't out, and so I said, sod it. I have heard from the good fellows at Dissecting Worlds that the History of Rome podcast is rather good and fascinating. So you know what? I'm going to check it out. So I click the link, and it's like 100 odd episodes. And I click subscribe. And I start from episode 1 and start playing Assassin's Creed, either 2 or Brotherhood. But yeah, I certainly started it on at least Brotherhood. And so I was listening to the podcast by Mike Duncan and I was playing it, and to be honest, the first 40 episodes are dull. They are dry and they are dull. This is history. This is Rome. This is the founding of Rome by Romulus and Remus, and they took a bunch of vagabonds in and they said, we have a city here. And then they have kings, and then the people of Rome say, no, we don't want kings no more. Fuck off with your kings. Fuck off. Yeah. Fuck off. Yeah, fuck off. We don't want a king. So the Romans got rid of the kings, right? And they said, we have a republic. We have a republic and we're not going to have any more kings. If any kings show up here, we're going to screw them in the ass because they're awful. And so that is how it was. And so that is how Mike Duncan was saying it was. And so I was bored to pieces. Because it's just, interesting, it's history. And, I've got a game here, so I don't mind so much that it's a bit boring because, hey, I've got a video game, I'm going around killing people, it's cool, I'm fine. Just, can you get a bit interesting? And then Caesar turns up. The great Lord Caesar, Julius Caesar. The definition of places for years to come. And he starts off as a Casanova, being cast out by those above him, and then he forms a triumvirate of power, and he says, I will have a political emphasis, because you see, I've been a priest, and I will take power. And so he's given an army, and he's stripped of his priesthood, and he goes out and he wins some wars, but he accrues debts in the course of his wars, and he's told that if he ever goes back home to Rome, he's buggered, because he will be arrested, possibly killed, at worst, exiled. And Julius Caesar, is just like, I don't want to do any of these. So what does he do? Well, in episode 43, insert well-known idiom here, he crosses the Rubicon and the die is cast. From that moment on, the History of Rome podcast becomes tremendous. It becomes fascinating in a world of political intrigue. It makes EastEnders look dull as ditchwater, and I know that to some people that may not be saying much, but the whole problem I find with EastEnders is that the plot is so fast moving that by the time you miss an episode because, life happens, then you can't get back into it because you're out of the picture. But nevertheless, if ever I do catch an episode, I'm locked into it, because there's cliffhangers and intrigue happening, and this was the same, because it's like, oh my god, but Caesar, and people are trying to kill him, people have killed him, and oh no, who is this? Octavianus, and he's the son of Octavian, and no, he is Octavian, but then he gets, adopted by Caesar, and he's like, right, I'm gonna form my own triumvirate, and I'm gonna take power, and then it's like Antony and Cleopatra story in there, and he's like, no, I will crush you, Mark Antony, and then he takes power and he becomes the great Augustus. Come in, new player, to play the role of the great Augustus, because clearly he isn't the young little nerdy nerdy boy who needed to rely on his mate Agrippa. No, the great Augustus is a king of kings, the great emperor, but no, he technically he's only the princeps, he's only the first citizen, because, we don't like kings around here, so, he's not a king, he's just emperor who's going to succeed to an increasingly decreasing line of hereditary heirs, and it's gonna be a bit windy because there isn't a direct line of heirs. But anyway, somehow you go through Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, and then after the death of Nero, you have like the 5 years, the year of the 4 emperors, or is it the 5 emperors? Anyway, year of one of them, and so there's like massive upheaval, and somebody's going to overthrow somebody, and somebody's going to overthrow somebody, and somebody's going to overthrow somebody, and then somebody takes charge, and it's Severus, and he's like, be friends with the army, and the army will keep you in power. And so his son replaces him, but then gets ill and dies. So his other son, the hated son, the black sheep of the family, takes charge, but then everybody overthrows him because essentially it had been a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the black sheep of the family had been like, somebody's going to kill me, somebody's going to kill me, somebody's going to kill me, and somebody killed him. And so then we have somebody else taking over, or is there another year of 5 emperors? Whatever, at some point we get to Diocletian, and he instills like the tetrarchy, which I only know because that is Timothy Swan's name on Twitter, the Tetrarch Angel. But no, this tetrarchy is like, it's 2 emperors and 2 Caesars. So the idea is, the plan is that you'd have a succession of rolling Caesars to emperors, rolling Caesars to emperors. And in its way, it's setting up for the fact that basically the empire is too big to be controlled by one person. And then Constantine comes over and he's just like, yo, bitches! I am the first emperor chosen by God, and I am a Christian, so fuck you lot! I'm gonna take back the emperor and reunite it for myself! Yeah! And so he does that, and he's badass and awesome and Christian, and I don't like that because I'm an atheist and quite anti-Christian, but he's badass at it, and so I can't help but love this, and it's brilliant, and it's passed down to his children, who reenact the tetrarchy but kill themselves off, until you get to Julian the Apostate, who says, you know what, we don't want no Christianity around here, we're going to have a brand new empire, and we're going to roll back the clock, and we might be able to reunite the empire, and then he dies by being too keen to help his men and not putting on his armour. Funnily enough, someone being too keen to get out and not putting on his armour reminds me a lot of my first D&D campaign, but that doesn't matter. So anyway, we then have, from Julian Apostate, the downfall of the empire. Oh, no, because I forgot. I think it's before here, or around here, or whatever. There is the rule of the Great 5 Emperors, which are, I think it's, Nerva, something, Hadrian, Trajan, I've forgotten it. Anyway, listen to the history of Rome, because it's brilliant, and I listened to the downfall, and it's brilliant, and I love it. I love it. I do, it's brilliant. to this Rome broadcast, and I just think that Rome is brilliant and amazing, and I'm so glad I went to visit Pompeii, and I went to visit the Parthenon and shit. I'll have to do it again now I actually like Rome. Yes, I will. But anyway, I highly recommend you listen to the History of Rome podcast, because there are 2 follow-up series. There is the series not to do with Rome by the creator of the History of Rome podcast, Mike Duncan, called the Revolutions podcast, covering the British Civil War, or English Civil War. It's Cavaliers and Roundheads, Oliver Cromwell. And then there's the alternate finishing off series by Robin Spears, or Pearson. Certainly it's Robin, by Robin, called The History of Byzantine. I might have gotten that wrong, but anyway, it basically continues off from the eastern half of the empire, because essentially, or am I getting that wrong? But either way, after the empires had been split, one of them ends up falling, and that's when Mike Duncan declares the end of the history of Rome. And this Robin guy was the history of Byzantine. Anyway, that continues off from the other bit of the empire, and I haven't really gotten so much into it yet, but certainly it's interesting. And History of Rome podcast by Mike Duncan, I highly recommend that you watch, because, it's brilliant. Oh, and by the way, the music here, it's from 2 tracks on Daniel Younce's Dark Horizons album. Can't be more specific because I had to cut together 2 different tracks for the new theme tune. But anyway, I have been Gordon Jones, and see you.